Hey, we're back and let's play two, shall we? And let's go crab cakes and beer, sprinklers and slides. That's the way we're going to do it. The Milwaukee Brewers and the Baltimore Orioles. Vegas, Mack, I missed you on Friday. Technology's a bitch. How the hell are you, buddy?
Yeah, it's just like in typical baseball, just a rain out. That's all it is. We're making it up. It's all good.
Yeah,
man, oh, man.
I've got other words for it. We'll get into it. Obviously, a crazy time in the sports world, and spring training rolls on and rains on, if you will. And let's start with this Milwaukee Brewers team, Mac. They are the cream of the Central. 3 of the last 4 division titles, 6 of the last 7 years. The crew has got to the playoffs, and they did it last year with a guy who in these Arizona parts is well-revered, a baseball lifer. If you looked it up in the dictionary, Pat Murphy takes over for Craig Counsell. They do it again. First thoughts on this year's edition of the Milwaukee Brewers.
Milwaukee Brewers, are they working towards another happy hour? I think so.
Ooh, that's good, man. That might be one of my favorite things that we're doing here in these spring training previews. And we'll get to the revised schedule. Obviously, we missed a couple here. But, the Brewers, I think it needs to be said. And they're a team that always falls under the radar. And we know that they have the, quote, small market moniker. And the Rays and the Guardians always get the credit for frugal and thrifty spending in the right spots. I don't think the Brewers ever get the same credit for it. This is a team last year that won their division by more games than anybody did in baseball. Now, is that the Brewers or is that the Central or is it a combination of both?
The Brewers can't. That's the division they play in. There's not much they can do about that. And it seems like every year that something is taken off of that roster, whether it's by trade or by free agency or by injury. And yet, if you look at it, they making the playoffs, they're probably the most consistent team in baseball as far as making the playoffs. So, that's where the issue is, though, with the Milwaukee Brewers. They've made the playoffs, but they haven't been able to advance.
Yeah, and, we'll talk about the ways the Brewers just kind of keep falling under the limelight of everybody. 777 runs last year, their most since 2009, and they had allowed 3.96 runs per game. Now, adjusted metrics, and granted, some people really can gauge thing out of adjusted metrics. Some people think it's a bunch of horse crap. But if you look at it, the Brewers should have given up about 4.3 runs per game. So obviously one of the strengths of the Brewers, and it's been one of their strengths for a long time, is their defense. But when you look at this team as a total and you go to that 777 runs, that was their most since 2009. They were 3rd in baseball in run differential behind who? Only the 2 teams that played in the World Series. And they don't get the credit for being as good and as pesky or as much of a pain in the ass as they actually are.
No, and part of that is that the Milwaukee Brewers are always good at developing pitching. And so, that definitely helps in one aspect of it. But they do offensively. This is not a bad team. Still a little on the young side. We'll kind of get into that, I'm sure, here in a little bit. But this is a sneaky good baseball team.
Yeah, and they've averaged 91 wins per year over the last 7. Obviously, COVID season excluded there. But, when I watch the Brewers play, they do a lot of the fundamental things right. And you had mentioned it just a few minutes ago that they really, really, really develop their players. They've got guys that they can use at multiple positions, multiple things. And obviously the big trade for the Brewers in the offseason was Devin Williams being shipped to the Yankees. Nestor Cortez comes over. Caleb Durbin, who's a guy we'll talk about here momentarily, he also comes over. You've got some great young players. Bryce Terang, and I'll brag on him all I want to. I've had him on my fantasy team. I love this kid. Stole 50 bases last year. They know how to manufacture runs and they know how to get runs across the plate. They play good defense. When we look at the Brewers, and we always start here with the pitching, they used 17 different starting pitchers last year. Freddie Peralta was their anchor as far as the guys that produced for him. 32 starts, 173 innings, a 3.68 ERA. He's back this year. What do you assess when you look at the Brewers' starting pitching for the season?
Well, there's still some question marks. Again, the last couple of years, they've been kind of hit with free agency and whatnot. But I mean, when you start with Peralta is a great starting point. They also got Nestor Cortez, and that might be a better move than we think. I mean, Cortez having to pitch at Yankee Stadium, he'll get a little relief. I think he'll get a little bump from playing in Milwaukee. Yankee Stadium can be a little bit of a bandbox there. And then Aaron Savali also kind of a little bit under the radar. And then Tobias Myers. I mean, this is not a bad starting staff. They've dealt with a little bit of injuries, but who hasn't? But this is a pretty good, solid 4 or 5. I didn't even bring up Ashby in there at all. But this is not a bad pitching staff, considering that the places they have to play. I mean, you have to go to Cincinnati a lot. You have to go to Pittsburgh a lot. You have to go to Wrigley a lot. I mean, those are not exactly pitcher-friendly stadiums. And, to be able to somewhat control those teams in those places, that's not bad.
Yeah, and the good and the bad that comes with the Milwaukee pitching staff. I'm glad you mentioned Aaron Ashby. A lot of injuries in 24. They're looking for him to be a big contributor this year. And I love, even though he's not guaranteed to be a Brewer past this year, but the Nestor Cortez move, I think, is perfect for them right in the middle of that rotation. We saw last week the addition of Jose Quintana, and those are Brewers type players. We're going to bring in KG vets. We're going to take the risk if they're only with us for a year. Where I have some questions with this Brewers team as they look to repeat as Central champions is in the bullpen, and it's mainly at closer. And now I think the answer is down the road for us here, and we'll talk about that guy here in a second. But they're going to start the year with McGill at the closing spot, Joel Payamps in the setup spot. But they get Nick Mears, and they have a full season of Nick Mears now, as opposed to just getting him late in the year last year. And I think Mears is a key for them in the bullpen. If Payamps can stay on point, and then the question comes, when do we see the guy who, in my mind, has the most Milwaukee pitcher name in the history of Milwaukee pitcher names, Craig Yoho? And oh, by the way, he's another guy that has a ridiculously nasty changeup. It's like the Brewers have a knack for that kind of thing when it comes to relief pitchers.
Yeah, I mean, the bullpen is exactly what it is. It's where the money is in Major League Baseball right now. I mean, if you're going to win games, you've got to be able to close games. And again, that's going to be the main thing with Milwaukee. Yoho has been brilliant. AA, AAA ERA under 1 or right around 1. And he's had a decent spring so far. So it'll be interesting to see how long they wait to maybe move him up. I think, again, a lot of it's going to be, how successful is that starting rotation. One person we haven't talked about who's starting to progress in spring is Brandon Woodruff. He's going to start facing live batters now. And so, again, not going to be there for the opening day, not going to be there probably for the first month, but again, another arm for the Brewers.
Yeah, and another arm that they're not going to have ready to go right away, and it seems like to be the biggest pain in the ass injury for any pitcher in the early spring, the lat injury, which can be a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. DL Hall, another one of the guys they got in the Corbin Burns trade with Baltimore last year, and he's another live, good young arm. And, again, he's probably going to be missing here for at least the early part of the season. And the tough thing with those lat injuries, and you know this from back in your baseball days, like that lat injury can be something that's easy to get through and comes right back, or it can be something that it seems like more nowadays we're a little safer on the, hey, it's a lat, let's be careful with it, let's take our time with it. But DL Hall is another guy that could be a huge contributor for them when they can get him healthy. Now, when we talk about their pitchers, before we switch to the hitters, and everybody loves the long ball, we know it, chicks dig the long ball, that's why we do dollar dingers. Of their 17 starting pitchers last year, they give up the 4th most home runs per 9 innings pitched from their starters. And you talked about some of those ballparks that they play. They need to cut down the home runs allowed number here because you know how that is. It's such a momentum thing. We're not telling you anything you don't know there. But their starting pitchers have got to keep the ball in the ballpark this year.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's, like I said, part of it's the ballparks. Even that Milwaukee ballpark can be a little bit of a home run ballpark as well. Not as much as some of those other ones, but yeah, I mean, and part of that too. I mean, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, and home runs depends upon the type of home run. And what I mean by that is, are these guys giving up the 3 and 4 run home runs, or are they giving up the solo jobs? I mean, I always look at like Curt Schilling's like the poster child for that. Curt Schilling used to give up home runs, but he was so good at keeping people off the bases that a lot of the home runs he gave up were like solo shots. So again, without having the numbers in front of me, I mean, I don't mind giving up a solo home run. Sometimes it even takes, I think, some of the momentum away from teams. It's just those, 2 and 3 run home runs. So again, it sometimes could be a misleading statistic.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we switch to the offensive side, speaking of home runs, obviously the big loss for them from an offensive standpoint, they lose Willy Adames to San Francisco. He's now playing in the Bay and in a park that's not very hitter friendly. And that's a big production mark to miss. But at the same time, it's easy to throw spaghetti at the wall and see if it sticks and go, well, they lost Adames, they're screwed. You take it a step further. You've got Yelich coming in again off of back problems. How does he bounce back this year? We know about Jackson Chourio at the top of their lineup, but the thing that a lot of people forget about Chourio is not only is he a great hitter, he is a really, really good defender. And that's what you do when you have a guy like that you give $82 million to before he plays a Major League Baseball game. And he was worth every bit of the hype last year.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those, he's got power, he's got speed. He's a fun player to watch. I think unless you're just one of those diehard Major League Baseball fans, you probably don't know who he is, and he's not on your radar. But he's a really, really good baseball player. They have a couple of guys who I think need to kind of step up a little bit. I think the big one for me is that one of their other outfielders, and that's Sel Frelick out of Boston College, by the way. I think he's ready.
I knew you were getting that one in.
Yeah, it was coming. I mean, he's like Jackson Chourio in a lot of ways. I think he's got a little more power than Chourio may even have, but he's got that speed. He's a guy that's, again, had a little bit of injuries last year, but I think trying to fill in those numbers for Adames, I think he's one of those guys that can do that.
Yeah, and when you look to the middle of the lineup, William Contreras, one of the better hitting catchers in all of baseball. Then you've got Garrett Mitchell. You've got Rhys Hoskins, who came off the massive knee injury, and he had, most would say, one of his worst hitting years of his career, but he also put up good home run numbers. Bryce Terang, we've talked about a little bit of do everything. Joey Ortiz, another one of those guys from the Burns trade. Frelick is a guy that a lot of people think is a candidate for the breakout star position this year. If you had to go by every team, ESPN marked him as the breakout star for Milwaukee. And then Oliver Dunn. And I think third base is where the biggest question comes in for the Brewers. You've got a guy in Joey Ortiz that's movable. You've got a guy in Bryce Terang that's movable. You've got Caleb Durbin down there. Mark Canha seems to be back every year with the Brewers somehow, some way. Jake Bowers, Andrew Monasterio. He's another guy that's going to get the look at third base. So I think third base is kind of the key. And Dunn's going to be given the opportunity, it looks like, at least with what we've seen in the spring, to kind of take that spot. But the Brewers have interchangeable parts, and I think that's what always makes the Brewers as dangerous as they are.
I think if I'm the Brewers, I want to kind of keep Ortiz and Terang in their spots. I don't want to move them around. I'd like to just see them, kind of just fit into keep that middle of the infield, shortstop, second base there. I mean, Caleb Durbin's already had 29 at-bats in spring training. What does that mean? That means
what does that tell you?
Okay, that means he's playing, ladies and gentlemen. If he's playing, that means that, Coach Murphy, he's wanted to take a look at this young kid and say, hey, what do I actually got? He loves him. I mean, he's put all kinds of praise on this young player and getting him over the trade. I think early on, from what I've seen, I look at that. I think you're going to see a platoon there. I think you're going to see Oliver Dunn against righties. I think you're going to see a Caleb Durbin against lefties. I think that's going to be a platoon situation, unless, of course, Vinny Capra, he's hitting 318 in the spring. He's out of options. That could be another way that they go. But I think the way I see this with Durbin and Dunn right now, I think it's a platoon situation.
Yeah, and Durbin last year in the minors for the Yankees, 90 games, 10 homers, 60 RBIs, 31 stolen bases. What is he? Oh, he's just another Brewers guy that can do a lot of everything, and they've mastered that. Again, follow us on all of our social channels everywhere but Snapchat at Mike Arana Show. Not on Snapchat because we're not 12 and Snapchat sucks. You can comment. Feel free to comment along. We got one earlier from follower you got, Roz, and I do agree with him here. Maryvale has the best hot dogs in the Cactus League. We have to make a Moss spring training tour visit to Florida next year and judge the wieners in Florida and just see how they are. But, you know, I think one of the bigger losses here that's not really getting a whole lot of credit here because he's another interchangeable part as far as the outfield goes for the Brewers is Blake Perkins, the fractured right shin. It looks like he's not going to miss a ton of time, but we're probably not going to see him till May. And that does impact their depth. Again, Mark Canha's back, so we know what he can do there. All right, game time, Mac. You ready? $100 of my money when we talk about the Milwaukee Brewers. NL Central champs. They are plus 260 to win the National League pennant. They are plus 2,200 to win the World Series. They are plus 5,000. You imagine the party in freaking Milwaukee if they won the World Series. And they're over-under on wins this year, 83.5. Now, they've averaged 91 wins per year over the last 7, excluding the COVID season, like we mentioned. I'm giving you $100 with my stupid face on it. What are you going to spend your $100 on when it comes to the Brewers?
I'm going to have to go with winning the Central.
You know, there's enough to be said for we know what's going on in the Central. We're going to talk about another one of those Central teams on Wednesday in the Chicago Cubs. We'll reset the schedule after our rainouts, if you will, for this weekend. A team we talked about in the Central last week, the Reds, Tito Francona's there. They've made some additions. Everybody's kind of not sure what to do. The Pirates, the Pirates are a tricky one. I think the Pirates get a lot of talk right now because of Paul Skeens. When you look at the Pirates, what else do they have? So the Brewers are the benchmark in the Central. Can anybody take the Central for them is the key. So I like your spot there. I'm going to play the Brewers under 83.5 wins. To me, there's a lot of questions here, and eventually the clock strikes midnight, if you will. And I think we might be looking at that. We don't know what we're going to get out of Christian Yelich. Brandon Woodruff, there is no ETA. DL Hall, we talked about. Perkins, you know, and then we're talking about guys like Durbin and moving pieces around. I think for the first time in the past 3 or 4 years, there's more unanswered questions going into the season about the Brewers than there are answered questions. That being said, Pat Murphy is a hell of a manager and seems like he can get everything out of everything possible that he has. But we know the Brewers aren't going to go out at the trade deadline and make a big flashy splash. That's just not what they do. And I think we might be in a spot here where the Brewers maybe regress a little bit. I don't love using that word. I think it's overused when it comes to especially preseason previews and teams. But there's just more questions this year about the Brewers than I can ever remember.
I don't disagree with you, but, you know, again, I look at it from this, who in that division did anything to catch up to them? I mean, it's kind of what you said. I mean, the Pirates didn't do a whole lot. Since Cincinnati, everybody is really high on Cincinnati. You start watching a lot of preview shows. A lot of people have Cincinnati really, really high. I don't know if that's the Tito factor or not, but I still think there's just a lot of unproven in there. We haven't really talked about the Cubs yet, but I mean, it's the Cubs, so we know that. But like I said, I think this is it's a division that's winnable. I mean, it's truly winnable for the Brewers, and they do. I mean, you take a look at that offense. I mean, I think between Hoskins and Contreras, Christian Yelich, as of right now, has had an amazing spring. He's already had like 3 or 4 home runs already in the spring. So it looks like he's back to being Christian Yelich. That, again, that could make the difference. And, you know, Garrett Mitchell, he steps up. Frelick steps up. This is a pretty good team.
Yeah, it's a solid team. And, the age-old adage that you can't win a World Series in April, but you can lose one. Well, the Brewers are going to be testing that because they start in New York against the Yankees. Then they get home and they have the Royals and the Reds. They do get 3 free passes when they head to Colorado. And then they get the Diamondbacks and the Tigers. So right out of the gates, the Brewers are going to be up against it and are going to be tested early with a relatively young team as far as guys you're asking to contribute and make up for. And I think, again, the biggest thing for me is when I look at their offensive production and the 777 runs, the third in run differential, part of that is a credit to their defense and the way they play the game. They're very aggressive on the base pass. And when you got a guy who can steal 50 bases, why wouldn't you be? But on the flip side, you're also asking to replace a guy who hit 32 home runs and your second most dangerous hitter, maybe your most dangerous hitter, depending on how you want to look at it, is Christian Yelich. Is how is he going to hold up over the long haul? Is this a year maybe Christian Yelich gets dealt to somebody? I don't know. There's so many questions about this team for the first time in a long time that it makes me really, really wonder what to do with the Brewers. Let's flip it over to the American League, shall we?
We should.
And I'm going to steal one of your lines here when we talk about the Baltimore Orioles. Prospects or parades. And I think this offseason for the Orioles has been very, very interesting. And if you looked at it on paper from names, the Orioles pitching staff isn't going to blow you out of the water. But when you dive into the numbers and you look at what's there, it's a team that was 91-71 in the East. They got swept by the Royals. They only scored 1 run, had 11 hits. They only gave up 3 runs in that series against the Royals, but they got swept and they got bounced. The Orioles now looking to do something that they haven't done since the 69, 70, and 71 seasons. Great job to start a streak in the 69 season. And that's make the playoffs for 3 years in a row. What's your first take when we talk about the Baltimore Orioles?
The Baltimore Orioles may need a Ruthian-like performance on the mound.
I'm going to put together a compilation of your initial takes on everybody. And they might be. And that's it. When you look at this, and we know about how loaded the Orioles are and have been, the new MLB pipelines came out, the refreshed rankings, if you will, for the farm systems. And it's the first time we've seen the Orioles drop as deep as they have. This came out on Friday. MLB pipeline has them in the middle of the pack at 15th, which is not somewhere that we've seen them. Part of that is because we've got Jackson Holiday, and we've got the young kids are finally up here. And we've got Kobe Mayo, Samuel Basallo, Kyle Bradish. You've got all these guys. Like, where do they fit into the mix here? But when I look at this pitching staff, yes, they could get the high ceiling, but they could also hit the middle of the ground here. Anything that jumps out at you as far as the Orioles pitching staff right away?
Yeah, it's terrible.
Other than needing Babe Ruth.
Yeah, it's not good. Zach Eflin was good for the second half of the year last year. He's a guy that's dealt with injuries. Grayson Rodriguez, great potential. There's that word. We'll throw it out there a lot with this team, but he hasn't, with injuries and whatnot, he has not pitched anywhere close to what the Baltimore Orioles do. Charlie Morton, you don't know what you're going to get out of Charlie Morton. Because of his age, let's just be honest. And so this is a team, and I'm not saying anything that people don't know. This is a team that has to play in the American League East. If you don't have pitching, playing in the American League East is a bear. It is a beast. And you can say they're going to score runs, but I don't care. You have got to pitch to win the American League East. That's the bottom line. And the Orioles may have one of the top 10 bullpens in baseball, but their starting pitching, there are a lot of question marks. And even their bullpen's been already hampered with some injuries as well. So this is a team that's going into the season with a lot of question marks already before the injuries. This could be a rough go for the Orioles.
Yeah, and you mentioned Zach Eflin, the 9 starts, 55 innings, 2.60 ERA. Now they get him for a full year. Grayson Rodriguez, I think, is the catalyst there, because if Grayson Rodriguez can develop himself into the ace that they expect him to be, now we're talking about a whole different ballgame. you mentioned Charlie Morton. He's durable. That's the one thing he has been. But eventually durability kind of catches up with you on the backside. He's made 30 starts per year every year but the non-COVID year. And then you've got Dean Kramer and then Tomoyuki Sawano, who they bring over. And we know the thing with the Japanese pitchers. We don't know what we're going to get. He's a guy that can really be a difference maker. He's a ground ball pitcher. I mean, ground ball pitcher, if you've looked at anything on him, he's a ball pitcher of all ground ball pitchers, but he's also 35 years old. So again, the unknown of the Japanese pitchers. If Grayson Rodriguez steps up to that level and Sawano comes in and he's the ground ball pitcher, we're talking about a whole different ball game. But we're also talking about a massive loss on the front side in Corbin Burns, who now resides about 40 minutes down the road from me down here in Arizona with the Diamondbacks. That's a lot to replace. Not only did they lose him, we talk about bullpen arms, they lost Danny Colombi too. I don't think people realize how big of a role he played for the Orioles. My thing with the O's is you have this team that it's a pretty solid lineup with the addition of Tyler O'Neill. We'll get more into the hitting side of it, but you've got to go out and make a move. You can't hold on to these prospects forever. And we'll look at what the Astros, a team we're going to talk about tomorrow. Eventually, when these guys graduate to major league level, you can't keep them all. So what are we waiting for here in Baltimore? Make a move. Tell me that somebody doesn't need Kobe Mayo or Samuel Basallo, and that can't get you a better arm. I don't know. It's head scratching to me.
Yeah, I can't take any credit for what I'm going to say. I heard this on a preview show, and they were talking about the prospects of the Orioles, and they say prospects are great. You want to grow that farm system up, but at some point, if you don't take the produce and use it, the produce rots. And this is kind of where I feel the Baltimore Orioles are kind of walking that fine line of some of these prospects starting to rot. Not that they're getting bad. It's just, we talked about the Padres and kind of the confusion of the Padres. Why aren't the Padres winning? I mean, you look at that lineup. Well, what happened to the Baltimore Orioles? I don't think enough was talked about this last year. What happened to the Baltimore Orioles? Now, people are going to say, well, what do you mean what happened to them? I mean, they came in second place. They made the playoffs. Anybody who knows anything and watched the baseball last year knows that there was something going on with that Baltimore Orioles team. They were not playing as good. Now, some people will say, well, they only cared about the playoffs. Well, if that was the case, they didn't get the wake-up call for that either. So,
exactly. You're 0-5 in the playoffs over the last 2 years. You got there, but you didn't do anything when you got there.
Right. And so, time, they're young. I shouldn't say time is ticking too fast, but, they got some questions. And for instance, what are they going to do with Gunnar Henderson? I mean, I know he's hurt, but these are guys now they got to start looking at extending. They lost, like you said, Burns, they lost Santander. All of a sudden, all these young guys are going to come with new contracts at some point. They've got to start looking to extend, and who do they extend and who do they not?
Yeah, and another guy they lost just for law averages and making a team put together that I don't think anybody is going to really mention as a big loss for him, James McCann. I mean, James McCann was a solid backup for them. He was a clutch hitter when they needed him to be. And, they add Tyler O'Neill. O'Neill's dealing with a little bit of some injury issues right now, which is not par. I mean, it's par for the course there. But Felix Bautista's back at the backside. You got Albert Suarez, Keegan Aiken, Gregory Soto, Andrew Kitteridge. He's dealing with a little bit of an injury thing right now. And then here's the interesting one for me in their bullpen. Sir Anthony Dominguez, who they got from Philly last year. That's an experience and a wild ride like none other. And we talked about this in the Padres situation from how it's clouding the Padres because of the ownership battle there. In the Orioles situation, okay, we had the transition. We have the new owners now. We have smart baseball people in that look like they want to be aggressive and they want to bring baseball and high-level baseball back to Baltimore. Okay, well, we're waiting. That's literally when I watch this, it's okay, you got the money. You're going to spend the money. We know extensions are coming, like you said, but how do you go into the season in a gettable? And I would have said this before we found out what happened today, that will drop here as soon as we're done about the stature of the American League East. We're going to talk about the Red Sox on Friday. I would have said this before this. This is a gettable American League East. and this is the best pitching staff that you're going to roll out here, I would say on paper, and granted the game's not played on paper, I would say this starting pitching staff on paper might be a bottom 5 starting 5 in all of baseball. Maybe. I'm not going to sit there and like hold my own feet to the fire on it, but it's probably pretty close. We know the Rockies suck at everything. We know the White Sox suck at everything. You would say those two staffs are worse, but I'm starting to struggle where I get to like maybe 3 more teams worse starting staff because this one's all based on what ifs. This entire staff is based on what ifs. That's a big problem to have going into an American League East that you can get.
You know, TJ made a good point when we were talking about the Reds, and he was talking about Hunter Green. And he said Hunter Green was the ace of that staff, and they had 9 wins last year. Mike, who's the ace of the staff?
Who do they want it to be, or who is it?
Well, I mean, who is it? I mean, that's where I start. I mean, you have to start. Who's the ace? Who's the guy? Who's the guy you throw out there every 5 days and say?
It's got to be Eflin right now. And I don't know how reliable that is.
Okay, well,
and you know that from being an American League East watcher.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, when you don't have that stud, let's be honest, that dog, when you don't have it, it's tough. And I don't see it here. I don't see it. Could it show its, could Eflin be that guy? Maybe, but we haven't seen it yet. I don't think Rodriguez is that guy because I haven't seen it yet. Morton's not. I mean, where is it coming from? And I mean, to have such a good bullpen, to have such a good lineup, and like you said, to kind of not have the staff, man, it's a little frustrating.
Yeah, and I think with Morton and Kramer specifically, like they're good pitchers. They're both durable pitchers, but there's not a super high ceiling there. If Eflin isn't fantastic and Rodriguez doesn't step into that role, and Albert Suarez is a guy that's probably, other than some spot starts, not going to be a rotation guy for them, at least right now, unless there's some injuries. So, that's the thing. And we can talk about the pitching and we can talk about, their prospects and everybody else down there. The one thing this team does have, and this is what more people like than not in baseball, is they do have a top 5 offense. Now, that being said, you mentioned one guy that they lost who is a massive loss for them, in Anthony Santander, who is up in Toronto now. So when I look at their overall lineup, projected wise, Henderson, Rutschman, Mullins, who led the team in steals. You've got Jordan Westberg, Colton Cowser, Tyler O'Neill, Ryan O'Hearn, Ryan Mountcastle, the Ryan, it's not Ryan, it's Ryan, and Jackson Holiday, who we will see for a full time here. I think the 2 guys that jump off the page that are keys to the success of this offense is Colton Cowser and Jackson Holiday. Jackson Holiday, about 210 plate appearances off the top of my head, if I remember correctly. He only hit a $189. I think a lot of us kind of expected that, first kind of year up in the show, a lot of hype. Colton Cowser's the guy I really think is a catalyst for him. He did hit 24 home runs, but he only hit 242. If Cowser, and especially if they project him in that 5 spot and he stays in that 5 spot, if he can get that batting average and that on-base percentage up, I think this is potentially another top 5 offense. You've got some decent guys on the bench, and Gary Sanchez, Ramon Laureano. We know about Heston Kjerstad. They've got the guys. Kjerstad's probably going to platoon with Ramon Urias, but they still have that potential. But I think Cowser and Holiday especially are the catalyst to what happens with this offense in replacing Santander.
Yeah, I mean, we'll start with Tyler O'Neill. I mean, Tyler O'Neill, from a number standpoint, it can help fill up that. I mean, he's a good offensive player. He's a Gold Glover as well. I mean, he can steal some bases for you. I love Tyler. I got to actually meet and talk with him quite a bit when he was with the Mariners down in the rookie league. I mean, he's a great kid. I mean, I love Tyler O'Neill. Adley Rutschman had a good year last year, not his best. I heard, the story that he cleaned out his house, got rid of his girlfriend, and all of a sudden this spring is having, a phenomenal spring so far. I think he's a huge key for me. I mean, it's tough to look for a ton of offense out of your catcher spot because of everything that they do. But he's I think capable of a little bit more as well. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it's going to be on Holiday and how he progresses. You can't even say it was his rookie year. I mean, he didn't get a ton of at bats, and he's got all the skills in the world. I mean, you just watch him play. I mean, it's going to be a lot of fun. These five guys: Kowser, Henderson, Holiday, Mountcastle, Rushman. I mean, how do you not want them on your team? You know what I mean? They're that good. I mean, they really, really are. Mike, I don't know. This is a team that, again, last year, I honestly thought they were going to not only win the East, but I thought they were going to win the American League pennant, and they didn't. And I'm kind of taking a step back, and now I'm a little bit worried about where they are, especially with their pitching staff. It's like, is their offense? I know it's good, but like I said, I don't think you can win the East without pitching.
No, and there's one team in the East, again, that we'll talk about a week from tomorrow when we play 2 on Wednesdays, and I'll reset the schedule here for everybody since we've got some teams to make up. But, Gunnar Henderson's speed, Cedric Mullins' speed, that's also going to be a huge catalyst for this team this year. And yeah, Rutschman, I mean, how many times did we put Adley Rutschman in dollar dingers last year? And he was the one guy that we needed. And again, home runs are a part of the game. Rutschman had a decent year last year. I think he'd be the first one, as you mentioned, he'd be the first one to say he didn't have the year that he expected. But again, it's I go back to the same thing with this Orioles team. Like you can have all the prospects and all the young players in the world, but eventually they either need to get you something or they need to be up and produce. And I think the Orioles are in this really kind of weird tweener space right now with what to do. I mean, Basallo is the best catching prospect probably in all of baseball right now, but he's going to more than likely change positions because Rutschman's a better defensive catcher than Basallo is. So what do you do there? You probably don't want to give him up, but again, if you're this close, and if we pan the camera out, seems to be the thing I say all spring right here, if we pan the camera out to the East, I mean, you're maybe one arm away from being the go-to team in the East. Now, there's a lot of people, as we play my favorite game, Mack gets spent $100 of my money here. A lot of people think they are going to win the East. And then there's a lot of people that think they might struggle to be a wild card team. So, that being said, $100 of my money to win the AL East, the Orioles plus 285, AL Pennant plus 650, to win the World Series, they're plus 1,700. And their over-under wins, 87.5. They won 91 last year. Vegas Mac, take my money and make a bet.
Under 87.5. Under 87.5. Yep. I think it's going to be a little bit. I mean, here's the thing that we don't know. Unless they go out and, like you said, acquire a pitcher, that's going to be the big thing. Well, I don't think with the staff that they have, they're going to be able to do that because there are 3 teams in, well, 2 teams in the East right now, maybe that they're going to be chomping at the bit to win that. That's Boston and Toronto. You know, the Yankees are still going to be tough. I know that, but I mean, they're going to take a hit. Let's be honest. But I think Baltimore and Boston, not Baltimore, Toronto and Boston both got better. And I don't know that the Orioles got better in the offseason. Now, if they go out and get a Dylan Cease, if they go out and get Sandy Alcantara from the Marlins, I mean, a trade like that for one of those big arms, does that make a difference? Yeah, it certainly does. It makes a huge difference in what they do. But as they are right now, I don't see it.
Alcantara's value just today went through the freaking roof. You talk about a team in the Marlins, and we're going to get to them here later this week. Again, we'll reset the schedule with a couple of changes that had to be made because of last week in here in just a minute for you. But Alcantara might be the most sought-after guy, and he might be the most sought-after guy by the entire American League East at this point outside of Toronto, because Toronto's seemingly got their pitching staff locked in. I think the Blue Jays are also a team, and they're coming up this weekend in our previews, but I think the Blue Jays are a team that kind of stirs the drink of the AL East. If the Blue Jays come out of the gates and they suck, that's a lot of arms that they're going to probably be more than willing to deal. if they come out of the gates good, this changes everything. And Alcantara's got to be sitting there right now going, thank God there's openings for me to get the hell out of Miami, because why wouldn't you? So when I look at the Orioles, again, our full season preview show, our predictions, our size, our MVPs, that'll be on March 26th, the night before the actual opening day. It's not Dodgers and Cubs in Tokyo, Rob Manfred. You can take that, roll it up in a ball, and to quote Tony, fire it right at the sun. I think this is a team that, at least as they're made up right now, and I think you're in agreement with me, I think this is a team that might struggle to get the last of the 3 wild card spots in the American League. And it's sucks because I love watching them play. I just don't have a whole lot of confidence in this pitching staff at all. Final word on the Orioles before we reset some stuff here.
If there's one stadium I could go to every single year, it would be the Yard. I love that place. My boys love that place. What an absolute, just amazing stadium to go to.
I haven't gotten to do that one yet.
Good food too. Good food. It's just a great stadium. Fun to watch. Glad they moved the fences in a couple of years ago in left field. But listen, I don't think that's going to help unless they solve something on the mound. This could be an interesting and I think kind of a disappointing year for the Orioles and Orioles management.
Yeah, and for a team that's on as high of a rise, it looked like they were on a rocket ship a couple of years ago. Now it's like kind of in that put up or shut up range. So as far as the rest of the week goes, the Oakland A's in short form, the Sacramento A's, the Philadelphia A's, the Las Vegas A's, the artists formerly known as the A's, whatever the hell you want to call them, short form tomorrow night at a special time, 6 o'clock on the West Coast, 9 o'clock on the East Coast. We'll talk about the Houston Astros, who have underwent a whole host of changes. Doubleheader on Wednesday, it's the Tigers and Cubs. Thursday, the Arizona Diamondbacks. Friday, the aforementioned Boston Red Sox. On the weekend, Cardinals, Blue Jays, White Sox, Pirates, all in the mix. Again, we're readjusting after the technical difficulties we dealt with. Also coming up this Sunday, our March Madness preview show. Believe it or not, we are right there. I was watching an incredible SoCon championship game before we came on the air here with Wofford and Furman, the Paladins. So all kinds of stuff.
Pepperdine, baby. Pepperdine.
Yeah, Pepperdine. Don't get me started on Pepperdine. So again, just to recap, A's in short form tomorrow, Houston at 6 o'clock. Then we're back to normal times on Wednesday with the Tigers, Cubs, D-backs on Thursday, Red Sox on Friday. And then don't forget our March Madness preview show. We are walking down a hell of a time in sports. We got the players this weekend, Masters around the corner, March Madness, NFL free agency, which lost its damn mind today, all kinds of stuff. Follow us on all of our social channels at Mike Arana Show everywhere but Snapchat. For Vegas Matt, for the people behind the scenes, we will be back with you at 6 o'clock on the West Coast, 9 o'clock on the East Coast tomorrow. Mac, watch that damn camera, and we will talk to you all tomorrow. We are out.